Have you ever felt like your motivation just completely runs dry by 2 in the afternoon? Well, you're definitely not alone. But you might actually be operating on some seriously outdated information. Welcome to This Explainer, where we are going to completely dismantle the idea that your willpower is a limited resource and hand you 5 psychological hacks to absolutely master it. Today, we're going to visually break down exactly how your brain manufactures motivation on demand.
So what if everything you thought you knew about running out of gas was just wrong? For the longest time, even the scientific community just assumed our biology dictated when we ran out of drive. You know the drill. If you don't sleep enough or you eat poorly, your willpower tank is empty and you're destined to eat an entire sleeve of cookies on the couch. And look, while those biological factors are definitely real, they don't paint the whole picture. Not even close.
Recent studies have totally flipped that old script. Take a look at this breakdown. Instead of biology controlling 70% of our willpower like we used to think, it likely only accounts for about 30%. That massive 70% majority? That is actually driven by your psychology. That means what goes on in your head is the true engine of motivation. You have way more control over your energy levels than you realize, and it all comes down to mastering 5 specific psychological factors.
All right, let's dive into Section 1, the willpower illusion.
This is where it gets wild, because our first major hurdle is the story we tell ourselves. There's this fascinating 2010 study by Professor Job V., and he found that the mere belief in a finite willpower supply actually drains your motivation much faster. Think about that. If you wake up just believing you only have a certain amount of willpower to spend today, you will artificially exhaust yourself. It becomes a total self-fulfilling prophecy. But the truth is that your willpower pool is absolutely massive. It far exceeds what you actually use on a daily basis. Your brain is essentially acting like a super strict accountant, putting a fake cap on your energy just to conserve it for emergencies. But here's the kicker. Simply knowing this fact, knowing that your brain is just playing it safe, allows you to override that false limit. When you adopt the belief that your willpower is virtually unlimited, you tap into a massive psychological supply that was sitting there all along.
Moving right along to Section 2, divide and conquer through chunking and confidence. So, how do we bypass the brain's false limits? We start with a cool technique called chunking. To put this in perspective, think about the illusionist David Blaine. He's famous for these incredible stunts of human endurance. The guy once spent over 63 grueling hours encased entirely in a solid block of ice. Imagine the monumental amount of willpower it takes to not completely panic and give up after hour 5, let alone hour 60. How did he survive it? Not by looking at the total time, but by chunking the task down. He completely ignored the 60-plus hours looming ahead of him. Instead, he broke it down to just one single hour. He would tell himself, I just need to make it through this next hour. And then he'd repeat it. It's a total brain hack. When presented with a massive 63-hour task, the brain screams, no way, we don't have the energy for this. But when you focus on just 1 hour, the brain says, hey, we can do this, and it hands over a little more willpower, piece by piece. You can apply this right now by setting a really low bar. If you sit down and tell yourself you have to write a massive 5-page paper, your brain is going to resist. The willpower cost is just way too high. But telling yourself to just write one single paragraph, that requires vastly less willpower. It tricks your brain into getting started, and once you start, momentum just takes over.
And this naturally builds our next psychological weapon, which is confidence. If you ask a stranger if they're confident they can lose 20 pounds, most are going to say no. The goal is just way too intimidating. But if you chunk it down and ask if they can lose just 1 single pound, suddenly it feels entirely doable. Confidence is completely tied to these small wins.
This is exactly why tracking your progress is a game changer. By tracking small wins and milestones, like using an app like MyFitnessPal to watch the scale bump down just a tiny bit at a time, your confidence shoots up. You start actually internalizing the belief that you can pull this off. And as that confidence rises, the amount of willpower you need to stick to your diet or hit the gym drastically drops. It no longer feels like climbing a mountain, it just feels like taking the next logical step.
Let's jump into Section 3, rewriting your code.
Now, let's look at how we can fundamentally shift our identity through language. Notice the massive difference here. When faced with a craving, saying I can't smoke implies a restriction. It implies you still identify as a struggling smoker who is denying themselves something they want. That takes immense willpower. Whereas saying I am not a smoker immediately claims a totally new identity. You're simply someone who doesn't smoke. It's a statement of fact about who you are rather than an exhausting battle against what you want.
We can take this a step further with our everyday vocabulary by replacing words of resistance like I can't, I have to, or I must with the phrase I want to. You actively agree with your new identity. I want to eat healthy. I want to go to the gym. It sounds incredibly simple, but this subtle linguistic shift practically eliminates the internal friction and the willpower you need to maintain a good habit over the long haul.
Up next is Section 4, the power of purpose.
For our fifth and final psychological tool, we need to shift exactly how we process our goals mentally. Back in 2006, Professor Fujita ran a fascinating study and discovered a direct link between the types of thoughts we have and our motivation levels. He found that engaging in what he called high-level thinking dramatically sustains motivation throughout the entire day. But what exactly does that mean?
Well, it breaks down like this. Low-level thinking gets totally bogged down in the stressful specifics. It's the short-term focus on the what and the how, like specifically what foods you have to prep for dinner tonight. High-level thinking, on the other hand, steps back to view the long-term, general ideas. It focuses on the really meaningful why behind your actions, like why you want to be healthy and live a longer life in the first place. Now, don't get me wrong, low-level thoughts are completely necessary to plan your day. You have to know what you're cooking for dinner. But if that is all you think about, you're going to burn out fast. Spending more time intentionally connecting with your ultimate purpose, those high-level why thoughts, is what actually fuels the engine. It creates meaning, which acts as a massive reservoir of willpower that you can draw from whenever things get tough.
Finally, let's wrap it all up in Section 5, the unlimited you.
Let's quickly pull this whole psychological toolkit together into a blueprint you can use right now. Chunk those big, scary tasks into tiny, manageable pieces so your brain doesn't panic. Build up your confidence by tracking small, easy wins. Seriously, adopt the scientifically backed belief that your willpower is virtually unlimited. Rewrite your internal code by changing your language to match your new identity. And finally, fuel it all by practicing high-level, purpose-driven why thinking. Remember, while biological factors like getting a good night's sleep are absolutely foundational, mastering these 5 psychological tools puts you in total control of the 70% that truly drives human achievement. So, knowing what you know now about how your brain literally manufactures motivation on demand, you have the keys to boundless energy. The whole illusion of the empty tank is officially busted. Which leaves us with one final, incredibly important thought to ponder as we close out this explainer. If your willpower is largely psychological and truly unlimited, what's your excuse for not starting today?